about the game experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Are you interested in the latest and greatest of personalized health and really owning what does it take to live a long and longevity life using cutting edge technologies? Well, on today's podcast, I have Eesmyal. He is an entrepreneur on the mission to invent solutions to wicked problems through technology and social innovation. He has co-founded 8 ventures in a variety of areas, including sustainable architecture, coworking, civic engagement, carbon analytics, education, and research. He is the board chair of MAPS Canada and the co-founder and director of the Psychedelic Data Society and the co-founder and CEO of Quantified Citizen, a mobile health research platform working on the disruptive and democratization health research, starting with psychedelic science. So without any delay, I'd like to welcome Eesmyal. Hey, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I'm super excited to have you on and to talk to you about the cutting edge technology with health and psychedelic research. I think there's so much around like psychedelic research and things that are a lot of things that people know that are at the edges of this that don't actually, and then that isn't really being communicated to the masses. And so thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. I'd love to first just kind of kick things off on just understanding what was your journey to really getting into this space. You know, where were you at in the beginning, and what were some of the steps along the journey?
Yeah, well, as you know, I'm an entrepreneur. I started a few companies. I'm really interested in tech. I ended up doing one of the programs at the Singularity University at NASA, and I got really excited about exponential technologies and just where things are going with AI, and I just got to a point where I realized that if I don't disrupt myself, I'm going to be disrupted, in the companies that I'm working on. So I started employing these technologies right away in the businesses that I was involved in, and I've always been excited by this possibility of democratizing, like the fact that technologies get to the point of full democratization, the cost comes down quite a bit, and they really disrupt industries. And I've been so pissed off about how the healthcare industry works and how health research works. It's not an area that I have any expertise in, just to be totally honest here. But it's an area that I deal with on a regular basis when it comes to my own health, in facing in Canada with the healthcare program, and it's a shitty experience. It's like, you don't have access to your own information. If you want to participate in research, it's like a black box. You don't have any insight, any information that comes back. And I thought, wait a minute, this is an opportunity to really disrupt this industry. But it really started with just kind of a personal curiosity, which is a lot of times how companies start. My good friend and I, who's my co-founder and CTO of Quantified Citizen, Kaylin Harvey, and I, we both got curious about psychedelic microdosing. And we were curious if it had any kind of benefit beyond the placebo effect. And at the time, the only evidence that was out there was anecdotal, but it was good. It was from Jim Fadiman and Sophia Korb. Jim is the godfather of microdosing. And, there are a lot of claims on the benefits. A lot of the Silicon Valley bros were doing microdosing and saying it's going to help them with their focus or creativity. And I was like, does it really? Let's do an experiment, like a self-blind experiment. So we started working on an experiment ourselves, and that turned into a simple app, little MVP. It got more and more elaborate. More and more friends wanted to join, and eventually more and more doors opened up. We ended up meeting Dr. Pam Crisco, who introduced us to Paul Stamets. We got connected to the BC Center for Substance Use, a number of amazing organizations and researchers worldwide who said, hey, you guys are onto something. The ability to collect anonymous and structured health data from people's mobile phones to inform psychedelic research. This has many applications beyond psychedelics. And so that's when we realized we had a business in our hands, and we incorporated and started from there.
That's awesome, man. The personal journey. And also I love the fact that you're like, hey, I'm not an expert in this. I just knew I had a problem and I want to figure this out. And
yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, you kind of, it was sort of proof to us that we were like, hey, there's got to be some kind of citizen science app or platform, some platform where we could run experiments. And so there wasn't that we could find. So we're like, well, we'll just invent our own. And then we're like, well, who are we to, as non-PhDs, non-experts, to come up with a study, And it's like, well, who are we not? And so we said, well, let's just try it and see what happens. And that turned into, of course, we partnered with a number of people with PhDs and, academic institutions and stuff that eventually gave enough validity to the study that we were doing to then get it published twice in Nature Scientific Reports. And we have over 19,000 participants in our microdosing study that we've done at microdose.me. So it's a huge accomplishment. It was a huge validation for Kaylin and I as entrepreneurs to realize, hey, you know what? We can do this. We can create a platform to democratize health research. We can come up with a study idea. We can actually make an impact in the world. Imagine what else you could do with this if other people were to use this tool.
Yeah. The power of, you're taking the ancient technologies of the psilocybin, microdosing, all that stuff, psychedelics, and combined together with AI and group sourcing seems invaluable. And it makes a ton of sense. It's just being brave enough to step out there and wave that flag, which I'm sure you've gotten some flack about the things about stepping in this space and making it happen. Can you talk about some of the different challenges that you've had trying to make this company work?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge in the beginning was, hey, you guys are doing, I think the name itself, right? Quantified Citizen. Yeah. It's a portmanteau of quantified self and citizen science. And so, it's about democratizing research. And so a lot of people in the professional research world are like, that sounds like hokey dokey citizen science. Like, that's not real research. You're not going to get, garbage in, garbage out. Like, this is not going to work. And so that's a big challenge that we faced. And so that's why we focused at first on the professional researchers. So all of our customers, all the groups that we're working with are professional research scientists with PhDs and affiliations with universities or life science companies to really validate the product, the research platform, before we open it up to the full citizen science version. Another challenge, it was just a little anecdote, won't mention who it was, but we were in a position of racing to get this app ready for Paul Stamets to announce it on Joe Rogan. And we needed to get the project through research ethics and to get approval before we could launch it. And so we were trying to work with an academic institution on this, an organization affiliated with a university, and they wanted a huge amount of money, and they wanted like a year and a half of time to kind of work on the protocol and the whole application and everything like that. And we're entrepreneurs, so we're just like, that's way too slow and way too expensive. Like, why don't we just do it? We'll just do it ourselves and get work with some advisors to make it happen. And we were told in a board meeting, who are you to do that? You don't have a PhD. You can't do this. You need us. And it was exactly the kind of thing that I needed to hear. I was just like, fuck you. We can do this. We're gonna make this happen. And we did. We wrote the majority of that research protocol that went through research ethics. It got amended. It got adapted by the principal investigator and other researchers involved. But someone had to do the bulk of the work to keep it going, and we were able to do that. And so that was a big challenge that we were able to overcome just by saying, we're going to do this ourselves with support from experts.
Oh man, I can imagine that pressure. You're like, okay, I want to get announced in the Joe Rogan show. We've got to get this across the finish line. Come on.
I know. Yeah. I mean, the other pressure I could just say is like both my business partner and I were just about to have our first kids, obviously not together, but separately. And well, you never know, right? These days. But sure. And so we were thinking, okay, well, we're going to launch the company, in 6 months, or, we're going to take some time off being dads and then launch the company. But when Paul Stamets was like, all right, I'm going to announce this in November. And this is, he told us in August, and, my kid was born in August, or he told us in July, my kid was born in August, and Kaylin's kid was born in September. We were just like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? With a new baby's on the way. But again, we managed to do it. So thanks to all the support from our loving wives, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure that's teamwork right there. Especially got to throw the baby in there and play catch. So
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, I have two questions on that one, but the first one being around is, this platform that you have that's not currently available to the publics, but you're getting a lot of research data out of it. I know Paul Stammen talks about how psychedelics and these ones can be neurogenesis and it can grow brain cells, and there's other things about that has benefits. But what's some of the data or scientific facts that you've seen come out of the research that you've done?
Well, just to be clear, so we have a public app, mobile app, and a private
Mm-hmm.
mobile app. So our
Mm-hmm.
public mobile app is the one that runs our observational studies, and
Mm-hmm.
including the microdose study that you're mentioning that Paul Stamets is involved in, microdose.me study. And so that's available. Anyone can download that app and participate in various studies that are on that app. There's multiple studies and more coming. The private app is for clinical trials. And so we're working on a number of clinical trials with customers on the private app, which is invite only. What I think you're referring to is the researcher web app where you create the study and you can deploy it to participants. So that platform is right now, we're just working with beta customers on that.
Sure.
And so, yeah, you're right. It's really, we're being selective about who we bring on as customers. But to answer the question around insights, I can't really speak to more than what was published, unfortunately, just because of the nature of how it works with academia. Being part of the research team, there's a lot more insights that we've discovered that we can't share until they're peer reviewed. That I'm excited about. So just hang in there. We have the 2 papers that have been published. There's about 5 more on the way. But just to summarize, on the 2 papers that were published, that we found with our observational studies, which again only show correlation, not causation, right? Causation is for clinical trials. So correlation, we found strong correlations, statistically significant correlations in improved mental health outcomes for those who microdosed compared to those who didn't microdose. The amazing thing about our participant pool, which we have over 19,000, is that half of those participants did not even microdose during the study period, which is known as our study period, is 3 months long. So these are people who are just participating to be part of the control group, which is amazing. So we're able to compare results to a control group of those who are not microdosing. The second paper, which is more focused on kind of a proxy for neurogenesis, you could say, is just around some of the cognitive performance that we found that was surprising and exciting, that where we found improvements for participants who are over the age of 55 relative to those who were compared to those who were not microdosing on the cognitive performance TAP test. So significant improvements with those who are microdosing, and significant improvement specifically with psilocybin. And then when we compared just the psilocybin, that entire group of psilocybin, broke it out to psilocybin and those who stacked with psilocybin, lion's mane, and niacin, we found even higher improvements for those who stacked. So that's pretty exciting when you think about that, the application of that in the world. I mean, we're all going to be facing neurodegenerative diseases to some extent. And so if there was a natural product that we could be taking that would actually help address that, that's pretty game changing.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many, being able to not only neurogenesis, grow brain cells, but also around mental health. And, there's, John Hopkins studies around antidepressant and that type of stuff. It seems massively beneficial. It's this, I feel like this technology, because it can be put into a box of a fun drug, a good times, have a good times. There's this thing of it being effective and fun that the people don't treat it as actual medicine. They don't view it in some ways as a sacred. Now there's a population of people that respect it, that understand how beneficial it is, and have actually used it to actually have deep impact on their lives. But then people that maybe haven't experienced it have these negative mindsets around it. So have you seen people shift their mindsets from being completely against it to looking at the benefits by showing the data? I'm very curious about that, expanding people's consciousness, no pun intended, from where of you can't do this, you're not a scientist, this won't work for you, there's not benefits here, to being able to show the effects, to actually saying, having to become undeniable. Have you seen that type of stuff happen?
Well, I mean, I've seen it anecdotally just with people around me.
Yeah.
But then we actually do have a study that has over 2,000 participants in it by the Diamond Therapeutics, a Canadian life science company that was specifically on this topic around attitudes towards psychedelics. Again, it's a customer study. I can't talk about the results, but we did help process it and analyze them for them as part of our contract, and so those should be coming out hopefully soon. I hope they're going to publish them because they're pretty exciting and interesting. So that's kind of the challenge, in terms of like we have our own internal research that we do and studies and so I can talk about those. But when we're for the client-facing research studies, it really they're a bit more tricky, and it depends on how involved we are in the projects. But yeah, I would say just from my sense is that there is a significant attitude change. If you just look at what's out there in the social media, you just look at, even like the Google search trends for psychedelics, for microdosing, like in Canada where I live, you can actually, and actually a lot of places in the States too, you can buy microdosing kits online and in stores. In some in Canada, you can retail, walk right in. It's illegal, but you can still do that. It's like it's like everybody knows, including the police, this is going to be like cannabis, or this is going to shift. And there's a lot of acceptance around this, and there isn't crime related to these kinds of substances. There isn't this abuse that we see in other kinds of substances. And so it's amazing that there's this social acceptance that's happening to such a crazy extent, including elderly people, especially people who read Michael Pollan's book, and then the documentary that came out. And there's more and more. You just look at Netflix, and the number of videos that have been coming out in series related to psychedelics, it's just been increasing exponentially in the last 7 years or something. So I think for sure the attitudes are changing. People are becoming much more comfortable with psychedelics.
Yeah, absolutely. But I was always curious about those. There's different moments in time that will cause people to shift their mindset from A to B. And there's like, sometimes you tell them stories, or of course, always doing it themselves gives them the ability to know personally, because then it's integrated into, an embodied experience, as you were, versus getting enough data to kind of shake off that old precepts and beliefs. And I did hear, I was at Burning Man, and I saw Rick Doblin speaking once, and he was talking about how, it will go the same way that we did with medical marijuana, how the medical marijuana is the foot in the door, and then it allows you to really open up that passageway to kind of say, okay, can we help people that aren't healthy become healthier? And then it kind of opens up progressively from there. So is that kind of the thought behind going the clinical route and working with the scientists and all that stuff, is to really have the data to be able to support it, to be able to kind of make it more available to the masses?
Yeah. I mean, part of it, it can go kind of two different directions. I mean, the way that MAPS is going is more as the pharma world of like prescribing, MDMA and substances and but in it for people with pretty serious conditions, which is important, right?
Yeah.
But it's not, that path is not going to get into recreational use in terms of like legal recreational use. Like it'll just be fully going through the medical system and what have to be prescribed to get access to it. There is a different path though, and I think Canada might be in a good place to sort of pioneer this, which is a bit more the cannabis path, where it actually becomes fully decriminalized and legalized and available for, in a safe way, safe supply, controlled, so that GMP manufactured, we know that it's safe, it's not tainted, that kind of thing. And then it's regulated in that way. Personally, I'd prefer to see it go in that direction. I don't know though. I'm kind of mixed, because I also think that it's not for everyone, and there's definitely a place for psychedelics in a recreational way as well as in a therapeutic way. And I think that not enough people have really tried psychedelics in a therapeutic way to address, issues of, say, mental health or it's profound. There's a lot of amazing opportunities to go in that direction. So I'm not sure exactly which way it'll go. But, for something like microdosing, that to me feels like that would be great if you could just buy it in a health food store, like.
Absolutely. And, you're making a really good case for a lot of people to go move up to Canada, because you guys seem to have things a bit ahead of the ball than what we have here down in the US, right? You're like, hey, we got it. We're chill. We got it. We understand. So you're saying right now, in terms of microdosing kits, you're talking about grow kits, ways to be able to actually learn how to grow your own medicine. Is that correct when you're talking about microdosing kits?
Well, those are available. You can buy those, no problem. But I'm saying actual bottles with microdose, like LSD or psilocybin in it, or even peyote, you can buy it in Canada.
Really?
And you can buy it in the state. Just Google it. Like there's companies that are just blatantly selling it and just taking the risk. It's crazy.
The way of the cops going, okay, we're just not going to pay attention to this because we know this is going to happen anyways. That's incredible.
Well, the thing is, like right now, there's a lot of research there's a lot of work with the police, with first responders, using psychedelic psilocybin, ayahuasca, and a few other substances, MDMA even, to treat PTSD that they're going through. So a lot of them have experienced the benefits of it, and so they're like, well, this is a good thing. And so I think maybe that's also influencing the behaviors.
Have you seen, combining together, obviously the medicine as itself, right? And then you, generally speaking, have an intention, you go through the process, and then, the medicine helps with the intention. Have you seen any synergistic stackings with certain modalities or therapies? The acceptance therapy, or what have you seen in terms of combining together the psychedelics with certain types of therapy modalities to have an enhanced benefit?
Well, I mean, we're there's a lot of experimentation happening right now, and so unfortunately a lot of the evidence is still anecdotal. So this is why we built Quantified Citizen, really is to really explore the anecdotal and translate the anecdotal to structured, clinically valid, generalizable knowledge. Like, there's people who are just doing all these experiments all the time, combining a substance with a modality, a different treatment, whether it's psychedelics or not. You take other regimes of people who have a health condition and they're trying a new supplement or some new, a new diet or something like that. And then, they're sharing some of their tips and tricks on Reddit or social health platforms and things like that. And it's this anecdotal N of one kind of unstructured data, but how do you translate that into actual scientific knowledge? And that's a really slow process right now. But our goal with our company and our platform is to accelerate that process. So we're excited to be launching a number of studies to address that very thing that you're talking about. One of them is called the Quantified Trip Report. So if you look at, which has to do with psychedelics in this case. So if you look at like Psychonaut Wiki or Arrowwood, these are these case, trip reports, narrative-based trip reports. People will submit a trip. I'm on this substance, this dose, and they talk about it at different amount, time points, what happened. Tons of research is based on that data, and people will run, machine learning algorithms to understand this data, and then they'll even make clinical decisions in terms of life science companies on how to spend money, allocate resources towards clinical trials based on this very messy data. Just imagine now the evolution of that, the quantified version of a trip report. So you have all that narrative stuff, but you also have objective data through wearables. You have validated self-reports before, during, and after. You have some longitudinal data, and you have it across huge cohorts, across multiple substances, combinations of substances, different indications that people have, and with the demographic data, a bunch of other stuff, all protecting people's anonymity as well. The insights you could get from that would be enormous, right? And so this is, now you take that same concept and apply it to all kinds of different topics. The bodybuilding communities, there's the people who have cancer who are doing alternative complementary therapy, and are anecdotally reporting better remission rates or something like that. But their oncologists can't really recommend these treatments, alternative treatments, because like, well, there's not enough data. This is a way to generate the data. So yeah, we're excited about that. But to answer the question, we within our research, we don't have enough of that information in terms of modalities. But within the microdosing study, we have tons of different stacking. So people are stacking with all kinds of different things. But as I mentioned, the most interesting results we found were with psilocybin, niacin, and lion's mane in terms of combining a psychedelic with a non-psychedelic.
Yeah, I didn't know about the niacin. I knew about the lion's mane and the psilocybin, and that's primarily the output of that is for greater neurogenesis, or is that for mental health and mental resilience, or what do you think? What's the intentions for? I'm not saying that this is official data, but what is the general goal for the outcome of stacking the niacin, lion's mane, and psilocybin together?
Well, this is kind of, I'm going to be speaking out of my expertise here, so okay. I just preface that. But sure. My interpretation, my understanding of it is there. If you just look at lion's mane by itself, it already has a cognitive benefit. That's been well known. It's well researched. That's why it's sold as a supplement for improving cognition, and so there's already some evidence around that makes an improvement there. Niacin, is a vasodilator that improves the blood flow to the nerve endings, and so a theory in terms of the mechanism of action here is that when you combine psilocybin, lion's mane, and niacin, the niacin is opening up the blood vessels in the body. Then it's delivering more of the active agents, the psilocybin and the lion's mane, to the nerve endings, to the areas that are atrophied in terms of damaged neurons. And then that's where the neurogenesis can take place and happen. And that's where seeing the benefits, which is really a proxy. We're not actually doing structural brain scans to prove that this is happening. This is just a proxy. We're just seeing it through these test results, this TAP test. There are other tests that have been done that have replicated this in terms of the synergy between those three elements when you combine them and the impact on neurogenesis. So there is research on that that does show that there is actually neurogenesis, apparently.
Yeah. What's the TAP test?
It's a neuromuscular test that you can that's done. It was originally done in a lab where you would tap your fingers together really quickly, and with these electrodes, and then it would count the number of taps and the speed and the gaps between your taps. And it sounds like a very simple test, but it's a validated test that can test for early signs of neurocognitive decline. So in the form of like Parkinson's or conditions like that, where which would come up as a slight delay. There might be a slight delay in how your fingers are tapping. And so a healthy person would generally get a lot of taps, and there would be pretty, as far as I understand, with not many gaps in there. And a person that's starting to show signs of decline, there would be these little gaps. Now it's hard. You have to run an analysis, an algorithm on the data set to really see that signal. And if you're doing a number of these TAP tests over time, as a healthy person, you're not going to really show any kind of decline because we don't show it until we start aging. But as we do age, you start to statistically see this decline in the results in the TAP test. And that's why it's a validated test to be able to measure this.
Got it. That makes sense. So then it depending on how quickly your synapses fire, depends on how quickly you're responding, which depends on whether or not it's at normal or below normal levels, which then gives an indicator for some sort of effect that you'd have, whether some sort of thing going on.
Yeah, and it's like it's one of many cognitive tests you can do, and we have a whole library of cognitive tests on our platform. So there's spatial memory, or there's hearing tests you can do, vision tests. There's a bunch of other kinds of tests that you can do directly on the device to measure different things. So as a researcher, you can just mix and match them all and figure out what you want to test.
Yeah. So then with the platform, with the Quantified Citizen and then the test, like what you talked about, hooking up like AI, CGMs, Apple Watches, that kind of stuff, to really kind of get more of the data into the systems. What are the suite of biofeedback tools and things you'd like to see really integrated into the system to kind of give you that total picture for someone and the collaborative research?
Yeah, well, I mean, right now we have the ability directly within with a web application with the protocol builder to create a study that will deliver participant reported outcomes. So using validated assessments. A standard mental health scale. So those kinds of things are in our library. The cognitive tests are in there. We can connect to Apple Health and Google Fit databases, so we can pull in all of the wearable data with permission, with consent from participants.
Sure.
And then we can also run clinician administered assessments. So for some things, like in clinical trials, you can't necessarily have a patient complete their own assessment. It has to be done by a therapist or a psychiatrist or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So we have that ability too. I'd say beyond that, we can through APIs directly connect to certain wearables, to consumer grade EEGs. I think that would be pretty exciting to start to connect to a lot of these other devices, and because there's this movement towards digital phenotyping, it's called, sort of this idea of creating a kind of mapping out the human behaviorome. Like we had the Human Genome Project. This is like the Human Behaviorome Project. It's like we have these behaviors, these signatures, these digital signatures of our behavior, our health behavior, and other behaviors that affect our health. If you can start to map that whole thing out, then you can start to create a predictive model of human behavior in a certain domain. So that's something we're excited to be working on when it comes to health behavior. The more data we have, the more participants that are participating in research studies, that we can be running predictive algorithms on their studies, running live, constantly improving itself, and then getting to the point of being able to predict, based on just a little bit of data from a new user, what's the likely outcome, or what kind of intervention would be most suited for them. So it sounds science fiction, but it's totally possible. And this is being done. If you think about this, the most advanced behavioral research is happening at Facebook and Google and Instagram and these but it's being used to hack our attention to sell us ads. Right? It's basically taking that same advanced AI, but running it towards and optimizing for how do you optimize for healthy outcomes? What's the most optimal path for a healthy outcome that can be generalized across a community? There's people with certain conditions, and also to the level of an individual at a personalized level. So this kind of introduces this world of personalized medicine.
Yeah.
And so but the only way you can get there is you need to be contributing your data. The more you contribute, the more insights you get, and the more personalized knowledge you learn.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, where it seems like we're going as a society, you have this whole institutional health mechanism that you talked about. It feels very depersonalized. You go through the whole process and there's bells and whistles, and you got to get approval versus you connecting directly to your own thing, to where you can get precision health and more or less be your own doctor to a degree. Obviously, go to specialists and do what you need to, right? So if you can see an abnormality, you're like, okay, obviously I need to go see a hormonal expert, or I need to go see whatever it might be, so that you can kind of get your vitals checked along the path, which sounds amazing. I also imagine something along the situations where you can see like, oh, you're around a bar and it's late at night and you seem to be spiking. Obviously there's some sort of, your pupils are dilating. Maybe you might want to remember the fact that you stopped drinking last month or something. But I love where this is going, because you talked about hacking your attention, but in a healthy way to actually get you the results that you're seeking, which is longevity and health, and really just empowering the user to be able to do that. And you talk about, what I think is really interesting, you talk about predictive models of health behavior. When you're saying that, am I getting this correctly when you're talking about like, oh, I see a spike in your HRV. Are you stressed right now? Or can you define just a little bit more about health behaviors and what that looks like?
Yeah. So there's something called that's taking off in the States and around the world as well, called measurement-based care. And it's a way of providing treatment care to patients, where you're taking measurements, you're using standard assessments, and it could be like a psychiatric clinic is just using validated mental health assessments over time. That's the simplest way, simplest version of that. They send a form, patient fills it out, they start to see a trend. Now if you supplement that with wearable data, like you said, HRV data, it's a good proxy for stress, sleep data, activity data. Now you have a bigger picture, a more full picture of that patient. And so, before you have that, if a patient comes into the psychiatrist like, hey doc, I'm not feeling well, I think you should change my meds. And the doc's like, well, how are you, how's it going? How's your exercise? How's your sleep? I don't know, it's okay. Okay, well, they just have to trust the patient and be like, yeah, I guess, all right, well, I guess I'll just improve and change your meds. Now, if you contrast that to the measurement-based care model, now the doctor can have a baseline of all this information and could get alerts and could then notify the patient, or when the patient comes in and says, hey doc, I think I need my meds changed, the doctor can say, you know what, we know there's a very strong correlation between your mental health outcomes and your sleep and activity. And I'm seeing that your sleep is really going to the shits and you're not moving much. So before I change your meds, let's get you on an exercise regime, start moving a little bit more, and let's come back. Let's see, I'll send you another scheduled mental health assessment. We'll see how you're doing. And then if things are still not so great, we'll change your meds. So this kind of measurement-based care leads to better health outcomes. Empirically, it's been proven. That's why insurance companies actually will endorse it by paying to reimburse physicians. There's a code and everything for taking these measurements. So that's kind of the future. I don't know if that answers the question.
It answered to a degree. I mean, it really let me know that, everybody wants to have a pill. Give me a pill and solve my problems. But it sounds like it's diet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking about health behaviors, and you talked about measurement-based care.
Yes, I thank you for that. Yeah. So where I was going with that is, so when you can start to, when you're measuring people's behaviors over time, and then say they have a psychotic break or some episode, something happens, some dramatic health event happens, but you have the data that is related to that, and then you generalize that across a large population, you can start to predict when it's going to happen. And so this is done for kids with different kinds of like Asperger's syndromes and different conditions like that, where before they have an episode, it's not even, sometimes the parent can't see it happening, but there's an elevation in heart rate, or there's some biometric signal that is a predictor of a particular episode that's about to happen. And if you can get the feedback before the episode happens, then you can actually intervene. Another example is there's an app for the Apple Watch for people with PTSD who have PTSD nightmares. It's a serious thing. And every time you have a PTSD episode, it's re-traumatizing the brain, making it easier to have that event again. So it's very negative. You want to reduce the number of episodes you have. And so these nightmares are really horrible experiences, but there's a proxy for that. You can see based on the heart rate data and other information that comes from an Apple Watch, whether someone is about to have a PTSD nightmare, and the watch can simply tap the person without, not enough that it wakes them up, but it disrupts their pattern and they don't end up having the nightmare. So this is an example of a digital therapeutic that's using predictive modeling to help people be healthier. So there's a lot of examples of this, and you just imagine amassing all of these kinds of health conditions and having a huge data set. This is just inevitable. We're going to continue to, apply more and more sophisticated algorithms to these data sets, generating more and more predictive models to the point where all it needs is just a little bit of input from you, and it starts to classify you as being within a certain cohort and providing certain probabilities of certain outcomes, and then learning real time based on your actual data and improving itself. So it's a predictive modeling future that's personalized as well as generalized.
Yeah, and that's amazing about that is, so sometimes when we talk about this and it's big data and everybody throws their big data and we'll be healthier, it's such a broad comment. right? It's such a vast thing, but when you can nail it down to something like that, and so that was incredibly helpful. Having a story about that, how you're saying, okay, there's an Apple Watch, you get PTSD, you go to bed, it triggers that, it's negative because you're basically making those grooves deeper and deeper, so it's easier and easier to fall into PSD. So then the watch just frictionlessly reminds you and kind of just nudges you out of it. There, right there is I think an incredible example it's tangible, that people
Yeah.
can grab onto,
Totally.
versus, and that's why I'm, with these things, the conversation I'm having with you is trying to really dig into some practical, tactical examples of what's the major benefit. Because I think some people are resistant to feeding a ton of data into a giant machine online, like we unknowingly did to Facebook and everything else, right? Where it doesn't serve us, right? It just controls us. But you illustrate some of these really good points, Asperger's, and be able to predict, episodic break, something going on, and be able to intervene before it happens as a telltale indicator. It's incredible. Is there any other stories like that, specific examples, and maybe one more, we can shift on to something else, that come to mind about a very specific benefit of, you talked about these large predictive models having precision health benefits to an individual?
Any other examples?
Yeah, I thought it was incredible. I was really excited about that, and so I was going to see if
Yeah.
there's anything else.
Well, I mean, I know there's lots. I'm just trying to think of what else that's been well documented. I mean, just okay. One that totally blew me away was, and this is not really necessarily a predictive model or anything. It's just more of a fact that, so it's just about the comparison between SSRIs and exercise, and that there was that it took like so many years to be able to publish this study, for it to even happen, to compare SSRIs for depression to just moderate exercise, that found that they were equally as effective. So it's like, what the fuck are we doing, right? Like, we're spending so much money on these drugs and keeping people hooked on these drugs, when we know, and now this isn't for everyone, but that when we know that moderate exercise can be just as effective. So, why is it that we're not, doctors are not prescribing these exercise more to patients? I mean, I know you said it before, we like to just take a pill, make the condition go away. But I mean, that's something that's been generalized. It's something we've learned. I can't think of another example that's very specific to, like, the Apple Watch one and the PTSD
If it
nightmares.
comes up,
But if it does, I'll
we can
bring it
load
up.
it up. Yeah. And to answer the question of why do they prescribe pills over exercise, because it's difficult to make a man understand something his paycheck does not allow him to understand. So if somebody is getting commissions on every time they subscribe a pill versus go out and work hard, it's like, I'm going to give you what you want, I'm going to go get paid, and then I'm just going to go and take my next shift. And that's the difficult thing with that. But if you have that modality that allows people to directly connect, you talked about the Silicon Valley bros, which I giggled about, of them taking the micro, because they know that there's a benefit, and the chances for them to get around and waiting years or decades for them to be told something that they already know, it feels like the medical industry doesn't really have our best interest. They'd rather keep themselves safe, wait until there's a mountain of data, than trying to focus on the latest and greatest technologies that are already out there, that you have a wave of lobbyists and mental health industries that they pushing against you. So that what I like about this is you're empowering their own citizens to be able to come together, to be able to actually take steps to become healthier and have a longer life. Have you seen anything with? Is there anything on the horizon of, like, because I imagine visions of, like, people being able to get, like, being able to 3D print their own drugs, or people being able to, like, have, I know I can, I went and I signed up for, like, the Forward Health app. And the reason why I did is they could take a look at my 23andMe. They could look at it and go, hey, here's what's going on with this. You might want to, like, I have, like, things with my eyes because I have blue eyes. So I can, I have a chance of some issues in the future. So you might want to do A, B, and C to take care of that in the future. Right. So have you seen any things where they're looking at, like DNA data, and then outputting anything besides, like, psychedelics and psilocybins, things that they can kind of re-empower themselves to take action?
sorry, just taking DNA data and then being able to have that like provide a custom psychedelic.
What I'm saying is there, my point
Go ahead.
was I was trying to make an example of taking data that's your own,
Yeah,
getting some extra advice on it. Is there anything that people are future using things? And I made up a term of like 3D printing your own digital drugs, right? Because you
right.
can go take psilocybins or anything else.
Yep.
Is there anything else? Because we do, obviously we know diet, exercise, avoid sugars, get a lot of sleep,
Yeah,
meditate,
yeah,
journal, have loved ones, deep connections. You don't need a lot of science and data to be able to actually know that that's what you're supposed to do, everybody. So how much
yeah,
data do you need beating over your head to know that that's the things you're supposed to do? We
yeah,
understand exercise, diet, friendship, connection, purpose. Got it. Check. Is there
yeah.
anything in terms of like cutting edge technologies that are coming out that you see that are really interesting to be able to help people? That was my point.
Cutting edge technologies are coming out there, interesting to help people. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's like, I think, I think that it's there's I mean, just like if people don't have a wearable device, I'd recommend getting one,
Yeah.
a Oura Ring or an Apple Watch or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just that the you got, yeah. So it's like, and there's lots of others, but I mean, the sophistication that's coming, these are becoming medical grade devices, and be able to measure oxygen levels, like blood oxygen level while you're sleeping, to detect if you have sleep apnea or things. I mean, that's kind of amazing, like to be able to have a device that's constantly measuring that. That can be quite empowering from a health point of view. It doesn't seem disruptive right now because it just is so ubiquitous. But in terms of other tech, I mean, I think there's a lot of promise in the microbiome, in my opinion. I think that we know that it's an under researched area. We know that it changes rapidly. It's something that has an epigenetic effect on our genes, our behaviors. Every time, apparently, if you in a new relationship, you get reseeded with different bacteria. If you change locations, you develop a new microbiome. And that has this huge impact on your health. And it's just something we don't quite understand, but it's an easy thing to test. Like there's lots of testing companies that will actually test your microbiome. It's just, it's an early science. So we don't have a lot of data on that yet.
I heard something. I had on that note, I had another podcast guest on, and I talked about like future tech and what he wanted to see, and I thought this was actually brilliant. And then I don't think we're there yet. Ready? He goes, "I wish I could poop in my own toilet and it could do a microbiome test."
The smart pipe, yeah.
Is that a thing? Is there anything like that out there on the horizons? Because to me, I was like, yes, because it seems really important. So I don't know.
Well,
Is there? Yeah.
there was a research project that was done, I think, in I could get this wrong. I think it was in Boston, but but basically it wasn't at the personal level. It was at a community level. So basically, they had a bunch of samplers at different points within the sewer system, and so they were sequencing the microbiome in the collective poops of the community over time, and during like a football game that was happening and stuff like that, and they mapped it all and created this really beautiful visual. Which is pretty wild, of the different communities of bacteria. So the interesting thing about that is that you could detect theoretically you could track disease in real time, nearly real time. Like you could detect the health of a community at the potentially at the neighborhood level. Like there are privacy issues obviously to all this, but whatever resolution is the right resolution. Potentially you could take like as the cost of these come down, just to be able to put them into the sewer system and make it part of a public health system, kind of starts to make sense. And so and if there was some serious disease or condition that was spreading, you could maybe isolate it, right? So there could be a benefit there.
Wow. When you said that, what it made me think about is almost like having like these communities, quantified citizen communities, or somebody where everybody gets together, they all pitch on the thing. Okay, we're gonna put these sensors underground, we're gonna have the red saunas, we're gonna have all of these different types of elements where everybody comes together. There'll be, the plant-based ceremonies over here, the genetic measurings over here, and you actually would have this totality, and they all kind of contributed together to say some sort of quantified citizens, like a community section. You could all look at your actual community, the united front of your local humanity coming together to check your global gut health. That's really cool. That's a really cool concept as a thing. And, I can see people do in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be pretty wild. I mean, like, I think that there is a kind of exciting opportunity to accelerate human health. This is just a pretty wild idea, but like to what you're saying, like if you could say, look, let's say we get some funds from some big companies to do something like this, and we say, look, we're going to pay, 1,000 people, 10,000 people to be full-time research subjects, and you're gonna do tons of drugs, and you're gonna do tons of interventions, and you're gonna get paid to do it, and we're gonna, but it's in the name of science. And so everybody is like consenting, and you're collecting tons of data, blood samples, poop samples, like brain scans, like and each participant could potentially be contributing to multiple studies at the same time. And they're contributing, and the data that they're contributing is going to benefit humanity, because they're the kind of research you could do at that scale could be, you could really accelerate some insights. So, I mean, I don't know, it's a pretty wacky idea, but that can be kind of fun.
Hear that. As you hear, I could hear 1,000 people just going, "Shut up and take my money. I'm in." I can see that. It's almost like a human biome, right? Where you have the biome of plants, right? But you have this human optimized biome thing where they put you inside a room. Okay, we're going to feed you the best oxygen. You're going to be okay. But at night, you're going to put on your EEG caps, and you're going to plug in all your devices, and you're going to go to bed. But then at the end of it, you could take a look at their, whatever, their and all that jazz, and be like, oh, wow, we've been actually able to roll back the clock years. It's a really, I could see people jumping all over that, and to be a lab rat. That also sounds, extend your longevity, have a good time, and contribute to science. That's pretty cool.
The objective would be like, look, you're going to commit to experiments that are going to optimize your health and well-being. Like, who would say no to that? That sounds pretty rad. And and it's like, oh, and you get like the equivalent of like a UBI, or like you get paid to do that, like, or you pay. I mean, however, who knows how the monetary way with the incentives would work exactly, but I think there's ways that it could be worked out. I think it would be pretty awesome. Like, it's just like, I'm gonna commit a year to be the best human I can, and I'm gonna learn tons about myself. I'm gonna be healthier after that, and all this data that I help contribute will help all these other people.
That sounds like, I mean, it would be an amazing research project, but that also sounds like a service that somebody would give to like the top echelon of humanity. It's like, look, guys, you don't need to work anymore. All right, you just got to. It's going to be a couple zeros out of your bank account, and you're going to go to here, and you're going to get a chance to spend 1 year fully optimizing yourself. But you also, we're going to anonymize it. We're going to throw it back in the collective good, But you just got to commit. We'll have the gourmet chefs come in. You'll make sure to do all this, but you just got to go through and participate in the community. Because I could see a big company coming in and doing it, but I could also see affluent people coming in and going, sign me up. I'd like to be healthier, younger, fitter, faster, better, smarter, all that stuff. Yeah. So that's incredible.
Yeah. We'd have to compare to a control, though, for people who aren't doing that as well. So that would be the shitty group to be in. If you're in a group that was like, no, you're going to eat McDonald's every day, or you're going to do this. Or you're not going to do anything out of the ordinary. You're just going to be yourself. But
you get a whole bunch of supersized me people coming through there, right? Just the biome, right? You could see that going through there. It'd be very different, very, very different. So fun. So talking about the quantified citizens, you have a mission, you have a vision. What I'd say is like, what is like I call the holy grail? Like, what is the flag in the sand on top of a mountain you're hoping to achieve by creating quantified citizen? What does that end game look like for you?
I mean, it's really about accelerating health insights so that we can improve humanity, right? I mean, it's really about improving the overall health, the health and well-being of humanity. And so I think that so that's like about longevity you talked about. It's just about flourishing. It's being happier. And so I think that that we can do that, as I talked about with the more we understand how it what are the things that impact our health, what are the
Mhm.
behaviors that impact our health, because it's there's other factors besides behavior that impact our health, but the things that we can learn on the behavioral side is an area that we can specialize in and really understand that, kind of as we're talking about this human behaviorome project, and then start to predict and generate insights that could help inform healthcare systems, insurance companies, providers, to say, okay, well, look, the evidence is overwhelming. These are the things, these are the programs, these are behaviors, these are the things, the combinations of things to do that maximize well-being, but then also that can be hyper personalized to the individual. So it's kind of both. It's about improving the wellness and health of humanity, and empowering individuals to understand what it is that they need to do to optimize their own health. So it's kind of both scales at once. So I personally, I'd love it if we got to the point where, especially with our citizen science version of the platform, where some kid in the not too distant future has some kind of weird hypothesis, that some health claim, I think, smelling my farts makes me do better at math or something like that. And,
Known
teacher's like,
fact.
okay, Tony,
Yeah.
like that's a weird hypothesis, but like, okay, how would you test that? And like what kind of experiment, how would you set up, how do you think more, in a scientific way, increase scientific literacy? And so then it's like, well, you can run your study on the Quantified Citizen platform. So, have a bunch of kids smell their fart, do a standardized math test, and kids that don't smell their farts and do a standardized math test. Obviously, it's a ridiculous idea, like obviously, but
No.
what if like there's going to be some harebrained ideas like that generate some interesting signal, and we'll be like, oh wow, and some that go viral, right? That and that's like, oh fuck, this is such a weird, totally ridiculous study, but 10 million kids did this study, and the strength of the signal is so overwhelming you can't deny it, and it leads to some kind of health discovery. It unlocks something that then leads to a newer opportunity. And so I look forward to a day, and this is part of the sort of vision, where a young kid who's not a trained scientist has an idea, and they are able to test it. It goes viral, and it actually leads to a real impact on health. And they're up on stage at some future TED type event thing, talking about their research that they came up with that went viral, that led to some major health innovation. Like that would be amazing. That's for me, the true democratization of health research.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be incredible, because that is part of the thing, is like the whole, you're not an expert, so I don't validate your opinion. But then really switching that to say empowering anybody that has any idea to really go for it, but use protocols, procedures, systems, frameworks, technologies to say, yes, I understand it sounds crazy that hopping on one leg actually makes you live longer. Much like saunas, right? Go into a hot room for a long period of time, and we're going to decrease your mortality rate, right? Like, oh, that sounds crazy. But being able to actually apply it and test it in a way where we're all collectively discovering what is the optimum health for not only the individual, but humanity. It's a really cool future.
Yeah, because why not, like for experiments like that are around human health, you don't need to have a PhD to come up with a study on that. I mean, it's just you just need to understand how to formulate a hypothesis and how to test it. And you can build a lot of the intelligence of a clinical researcher into the software itself. And so that, and get feedback from people, from the community as well, to improve your protocol. So, I mean, that's kind of the idea. But we also want to make sure that in the name of open science, that every protocol, we have a markup language for our protocols in our platform. So you can actually share a protocol with other researchers. You could fork a protocol. So if someone comes up with a cool study, someone else can replicate that, or they can change it, they can fork it with attribution. So it's kind of like the open source software model for research protocols, which helps address the replication crisis, especially in behavioral science.
That's interesting. It's almost like the GitHub of health protocols.
Yeah, it's like the GitHub of health protocols for sure.
That's super interesting. So if the holy flail, like, by the way, I can't stop thinking about the kid who farts and creates a test out of it, and then tricking some other kid, like Bodie McBoatface style, of actually of falsing the. But with that aside, I just can't. Sorry, it's in my head there. But with the kid who is eventually going to one day test this out with a forked protocol that then can validate something that is unobvious and creates a unique solution that then can be applied to the masses, like cold therapy or anything else that we've discovered along the way of this journey. For you, what is the dragon? Like, what is the thing so difficult to overcome that's going to be the greatest challenge for you to make that dream a reality?
I mean, it's a few things. I mean, it's hitting that critical mass of revenues and users, right? So we're a startup, we're venture backed, we've done completed 2 successfully oversubscribed rounds, and we're entering our 3rd round, our seed plus round right now, actually. But the market's kind of a bit scary right now in terms of investment market. So there's a dragon right there, just funding itself, right? And it's also if we build it, will they come? I mean, they are coming. We have lots of users. We have customers coming. That's growing. We have traction. Is it enough to get to where we need to go, right? So those are just our own valid concerns, but also just like, for me, personal fears. But I think there's that. There's going to be also just another one around, and it may not be as big of a deal as we think, but just around how personal, like privacy around data. Like right now,
Right.
we've been very, very intentional about making it super privacy centric. We don't collect any personally identifiable information. There's not even an email or user. There's no IP tracking. Like, it's just, we're completely anonymous. There's some pros and cons to that. So we can use a third-party KYC service to verify identity without us knowing that. That could be useful for some clients. Would that turn off some of our users? We don't know yet. We need to kind of and do we need to be always in that way? We started that way because of the nature of some of the studies that we're doing on psychedelics, because of the illegal nature of them. We didn't want people to feel worried about being honest about their responses. So that how people relate to us, related to privacy, and where we go with privacy, it could potentially be another dragon.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, part of being an entrepreneur in the startup space is being able to stay in the fight, and you need revenue to make that happen. So that makes a ton of sense. I mean, the desire of being able to take control of your own health, being able to use psychedelics to make that happen, and really find the best protocols and systems. There's a need there, but it sounds like one of the things you just have is, what's the best way for you to monetize when you don't have the number one thing that people use to monetize is using people's data to monetize off of them, which is what Facebook and everybody else has done. So because you have a personal code of ethic of saying, we're not going to take your data, it makes it more challenging, but also you're providing major benefits. So there is a need there, just figuring out just what's that magic framework for you guys that can serve your customers while still keep you healthy and thriving as a business entity.
Yeah, so, I mean, we do take data. I mean, people. So that is the currency of our platform is health data. That is why customers pay to post their studies on our platform because they get access to engaged participants who contribute health data through studies, right? So they're getting data. It's just anonymous data.
Yes.
And we're not, but would we get, it would be more valuable if we had more data about them.
Sure.
But we're trying to be very ethical and about this and just really be clear about, like, we don't want to cross that line.
Makes sense. Yeah. You don't want to go feed them ads about Viagra, right?
No.
Yeah. 100%. And it's honorable. And I think that's while I think it impacts your short-term games, I imagine in the long term, because of the goodwill and the fact that that you're in it for the right reasons, I think it's going to serve you. So that's beautiful. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about you, Quantified Citizen, or anything else you're doing before you tell them how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, maybe just like I guess I kind of mentioned this a little bit, but one thing that we're really trying to promote and just get the meme out there is around this concept of agile development, right?
Mm-hmm.
So agile research. Imagine applying agility to research. So it's like, what's the MVP of a research study? How do you come up with a really basic? And so we call these, just like pilot studies, and you can come up with a really quick, very quick study. And then get some initial feedback from that. It's similar to, like, if you do a simple ad, kind of 4-hour work week, Tim Ferriss model, like, see, do you get a signal? Does that give you enough justification to start the business in that area? In the same way with research, you can do this. You can do these simple studies that give you a little bit of feedback, enough of a signal to then say, okay, well, enough to test your hypothesis. Now, with that information, that can feed a more rigorous study that then you go through research ethics for, say, more of a prospective observational study. Now you get more data from that then can inform a clinical trial, and so on and so on. And so each time you step up, you're getting into a more complicated and sophisticated and expensive type of research study, but you're de-risking it at every stage. So rather than starting at the clinical trial space, you can start at this early stage, and with that data, it can de-risk and accelerate your research and inform your spending in your clinical trial space. So that's one concept I'm really trying to get across to a lot of people out there, especially in the psychedelic space. What else? I guess the other one is this concept of health research as a kind of recipe. So when we think about, we're tech entrepreneurs, so we apply that kind of lens onto health research, and it's like, well, what's actually happening? What is a research study? And if you boil it down from a data point of view, it's like, it's a series of collections of these standard health measurements, these assessments that are done, these tests over time, and you collect that together, and that's your protocol, that's your study. But it's also, you can think about it kind of like a recipe, these ingredients. And so, in the case of the protocol, the instructions are for the researchers to be able to run the experiment, and the ingredients are the measurements made on human subjects. And so what we're trying to do is provide a reliable source of high quality ingredients that are pre-measured. So what we've done is we've taken the concept of a study and broken it out into shareable components. So for instance, if a user joins the platform and they've already completed parts of that ingredient, they've already completed, say, a demographics or a personality assessment or a mental health assessment, and that's also part of that new researcher's study that they're about to join, rather than redoing it because that's redundant, the study just asks the user, hey, you've already completed 40% of the study. Do you want to share that with the researcher? Do you consent? And then you can override those values if you want. So by having shareable components, it actually makes the whole process of participation more efficient. It's easier for the participant to complete a study, so compliance levels go up. And for the researcher, they get higher participation rates as a result of that efficiency. But also what we've done is we've even taken the measurements, these components, as atomized assessments that users can do on their own. So if you want to just track within the realm of mental health, your mental health using a PHQ-9 assessment or a DAS-21, these are different mental health jargon assessments or whatever, you can track that and see how that changes over time and how maybe it correlates with your wearable data. And that now you're collecting all this data on yourself without even joining a study. You're just taking components of the studies, the ingredients, and then mixing and matching them and learning about yourself. Now, if you join the study, that researcher may say, you know what, if the participant has historical data, please request access to it. So now they have historical preclinical data that they can use within their model that can provide value. So there's this idea of like sharing these components can provide a lot of value and innovation when it comes to research. And I just wanted to make sure to get that across.
No, I love that. And it makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, you're removing, I have medical records. We all have medical records. But the problem is they're locked behind this institution, right? The medical institution. And what you're saying is by making, you're talking about templates, you're talking about almost like this health recipe cookbook, right? That you're going to be able, every time you fill out a piece of that recipe for your own templatized cookbook, you're going to have all of these different frameworks, all of these different recipes. So then if I go to do another, cook another dish with another study or something else, I'll have these things all pre-populated. My data, my facts, my things like that. And I can, okay, yeah, you can have access to my Apple Watch history and my assessments and my mental health tests and everything else. And so they get all that data. So they get better data. I get better results. They get a completed assessment. And so it lowers the friction and barrier for combining together the participant and the researcher to get overall better health results.
Yeah, exactly. And you can also, as a researcher, because not all research studies are prospective when it comes to observational studies, some are retrospective. So they just look at what someone has done in the past or completed data. And so if you think about being able to have shareable measures across multiple studies within this public platform, then you could say, okay, well, I'm thinking recipe again. You're like, okay, well, I'm curious about substance use across the world by demographic and by health condition. And then you could say, we can be like, well, you know what, within our within all the studies that have been active and that are complete, we have like 7 that are using the standardized substance use survey, and all of them are using standardized demographic survey, and a number of them have this other mental health survey. So you could say, okay, well, those are the components of my recipe. I'm just going to pull those data sets out, and now that becomes a cohort of participants across multiple studies that all completed the exact same data that I needed for my paper, and then they can publish that, and it's all anonymous. So that becomes another way of sort of adding value to recycling the data in a way.
Yeah, I know, it makes sense because then you're all collectively looking at, okay, what are not only the best, not only we're going to make it easy for you to have all these health modalities tracked and measured. Okay, but what is the consistency when I'm in an area of study and I want to understand this and I want to basically contribute to the scientific body of knowledge? How do people typically do it, and what can I leverage to kind of just fork that knowledge set and bring it into my own world and say, okay, great, this is how you do studies. This is the background of the test taken, the data sampled, the output, the historical data, and then bring all that to the future. So instead of me reinventing the wheel every time I want to do a new study, exactly. I already have the wheels together, and I can just get in my car and drive away.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. That's brilliant. I think it's incredible. Eesmyal, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you being here. How do people get a hold of you? How do people find out about the Quantified Citizen? What does that look like?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. And if folks just go to quantifiedcitizen.com, that's the website. There's a contact form there. You can find me pretty easily on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter. It's just my first name, Eesmyal, Eesmyal. People can DM me if people are interested in the raise that we're currently doing. Any investors out there, then definitely DM me or send a contact form on our website. And we have like a ton of studies that we're really excited about that are on our platform now, and lots of upcoming. Our new microdosing study, version 2, based on the insights we learned from version 1 from the 19,000 participants. That new version is going to be launched. I think it's tomorrow or the next day. And we have just a bunch of other exciting studies. There's a number of clinical trials that are happening. So if you want to know if you're eligible for one of those clinical trials, sign up to the app and see if you're eligible for one of the clinical trials. In that case, in a clinical trial, you are given psychedelics. So just, and if people have ideas too, I'd love to hear it. Like any ideas for a type of study that you'd like to see, or, anything like that, then please let us know.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate being on the show. Have a blessed and beautiful day. I'll see you on the other side.
Awesome. Thanks, Dylan. Take care.
Take care. Eesmyal. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening. See you on the